Bones found in Franklin County, Indiana, believed to be from Katelyn Markham.
She was just days away from turning 22, about to start a new chapter in life. But on one fateful night, Katelyn Markham vanished. Was it a choice, or was something far more disturbing at play? Katelyn Markham was a bright young woman, an artist with a promising future, and an intelligent student. Living in Fairfield, Indiana, she was close to her family and engaged to the man she loved, John Carter. Just days before her 22nd birthday, she disappeared without a trace. No signs, no clues. Just an empty space where Katelyn had once been. Katelyn's sudden disappearance left her family and friends in shock, and the community stunned. Everything seemed perfect for Katelyn until the night she vanished, leaving only unanswered questions behind. Was this a tragic mistake, or was there more hidden beneath the surface? Katelyn Markham was a lively young woman with a talent for painting and a dream of becoming a graphic designer. She was bright, responsible, and full of energy. Her family and friends described her as someone with a promising future, and she was looking forward to her upcoming wedding with her fiancé. Katelyn's final evening before her 22nd birthday was quiet and intimate. She spent the night with her fiancé, John Carter, enjoying a small dinner and talking about their future together. After their time together, John left Katelyn's apartment and they exchanged goodbyes. Before heading to bed, Katelyn sent a cheerful text message to a friend, reflecting her upbeat mood. Those who knew her were reassured that all seemed well, but that night would mark the last time anyone would see Katelyn alive. The messages Katelyn sent were filled with excitement for the future, but in a twist no one could have foreseen, everything would change soon after. The following morning, John arrived at Katelyn's apartment expecting a normal visit. Her car was parked outside, but Katelyn was nowhere to be found. Her dog was in the yard, left unattended, an unusual sight. John called her multiple times, but her phone was off, and there was no answer. A sense of dread washed over him as he realized something was very wrong. Katelyn's absence wasn't like her, it wasn't normal. Panicking, John reached out to Katelyn's family. Her parents and loved ones shared the same concern. No one could explain where she had gone or what had happened. The worst fear was slowly creeping into their hearts. Katelyn was missing. With growing concern, John dialed 911. His voice cracked with anxiety as he spoke to the dispatcher, describing Katelyn's disappearance.
Hi, my name is John Carter. I am calling. I know that you're not supposed to report a missing person before 24 hours, but my fiancé is missing. I can't find her anywhere.
Okay, where did you see her last?
I saw her at like 12 o'clock last night. She stays in the house by herself, so I'm really nervous. Her car is still there.
Where was she at midnight last night when you
She
left?
was at her house. She was going to bed. She wasn't going out to do anything, so she would have been in her bed. And I mean, I've been with her for 6 years. She's not deceiving, she doesn't.
Okay, and you guys didn't have an argument or anything?
Not at all.
He mentioned that her phone was off and she hadn't shown up for their plans. He was certain something wasn't right. When the police arrived at Katelyn's apartment, they quickly assessed the situation. They interviewed John, who was visibly distressed, though something about his calmness raised questions. He had noticeable scratches on his neck, which he claimed came from a recent encounter with a cat. The officers noted that Katelyn's apartment showed no signs of forced entry, and her belongings seemed undisturbed. Katelyn's family and friends wasted no time in stepping in. Her loved ones organized search parties covering local parks and neighborhoods, hoping to find even the smallest hint of where she could be. Flyers were posted all over town, and social media became a crucial tool for spreading the word about Katelyn's disappearance. The local media gave Katelyn's case widespread attention, but despite their efforts, no new information came forward. Community members offered their support in every way they could, from volunteering to help search to donating resources for the investigation.
With the latest on the case and a grieving father's reaction.
Katelyn's father, in particular, was determined to find his daughter. He rejected the possibility that she had left on her own, feeling strongly that something more had happened. His firm belief that Katelyn would never have disappeared voluntarily put additional pressure on law enforcement to take the case more seriously. Despite the community's outpouring of support, the investigation remained at a standstill. As the investigation progressed, police turned their attention to Katelyn's phone records. They discovered that the last text exchange between Katelyn and John had raised some eyebrows. He had asked her if she was okay, but after that, her phone went silent. There was no evidence of a struggle in her apartment, and Katelyn's phone had been turned off. John's behavior, however, seemed increasingly strange. While he maintained he had no idea where Katelyn had gone, the lack of any substantial leads left investigators wondering if there was more to the story. As the investigation continued, John's behavior became more and more peculiar. He spoke of Katelyn in the past tense, as though he had already accepted that she was gone. His comments about her disappearance seemed distant and oddly unemotional. While police were still focused on locating Katelyn, John's odd behavior began to raise red flags. They couldn't ignore the possibility that he might know more about Katelyn's disappearance than he was revealing. But for the moment, finding Katelyn remained the priority. At first, the police were hesitant to classify Katelyn's disappearance as anything other than a voluntary departure. They considered the possibility that Katelyn had left on her own, even though this didn't align with the understanding her family had of her. The search efforts continued with relentless determination. Local parks, woods, and neighborhoods were thoroughly calmed, but there were no signs of Katelyn. Yet every week, the community's energy renewed as they continued their search. As the investigation dragged on, several leads emerged, each one more hopeful than the last, but ultimately leading nowhere. The leads, though promising at first, quickly dissipated, leaving behind only confusion and more unanswered questions. Nearly 2 years after Katelyn's disappearance, a group of hikers stumbled upon a discovery that would alter everything. While walking through a wooded area approximately 30 miles from Katelyn's home, they found her remains wrapped in plastic bags. The location where Katelyn's body was found was secluded, and the fact that it had been hidden for such a long time only added to the horror.
It's that mindset that drove Dave Rader and his team of EquiSearch volunteers to spend 14 hours scouring this Indiana creek bed on Saturday.
Cans, bottles, broken glass. I mean, and to sit there and really look for something about the size of your fingertip was just incredible.
He says they found at least 4 or 5 bones that investigators believe to be addition to the creek.
Forensic experts arrived quickly, and after examination, it was confirmed that the remains were indeed Katelyn's. The news of the discovery sent shockwaves through the community. Her family, who had held on to the hope that Katelyn was still alive, now faced an unimaginable reality. The discovery reopened the pain of her loss, but it also marked a turning point in the investigation. While the wounds were still fresh, the new evidence gave the authorities a renewed sense of purpose and a direction to focus their efforts. When forensic experts analyzed Katelyn's remains, they found signs of trauma on her bones. The evidence pointed to foul play, confirming what everyone had feared. Katelyn had not simply disappeared, and she had not died naturally. The experts also noted that the condition of her body suggested it had been moved after her death, adding complexity to the investigation. This new detail led to the conclusion that someone had gone to great lengths to hide her remains. DNA tests were immediately carried out to ensure the identity of the body and to gather any further evidence that could lead investigators to her killer. With this new development, the case was handed over to the Major Crimes Unit, where experienced detectives were brought in to handle the growing complexity of the situation. The discovery of Katelyn's remains was a devastating blow to her family. The hope they had clung to for so long was shattered, and the reality of her murder became undeniable. Her father, who had been the most vocal in believing Katelyn was still out there, struggled to come to terms with the loss of his daughter. In the days following the discovery, the community rallied around Katelyn's family, providing support and solidarity. Katelyn's funeral was held, and it was there that her family and friends finally had the opportunity to say their final goodbyes. The sorrow was overwhelming, but amid the mourning, Katelyn's family made a promise to seek justice for her. The pain of her death would never fade, but they would ensure that whoever was responsible for taking her life would be held accountable. The investigation into Katelyn's disappearance was reopened in 2023, when new evidence brought the case back to the forefront. Detectives revisited the phone records and inconsistencies in John's initial statements. A closer look at his behavior raised questions, especially after they discovered several discrepancies. Detectives re-examined John's interactions with those close to Katelyn and found troubling signs. John's demeanor during the investigation and his responses didn't line up with the facts that were coming to light. The more they looked into his actions, the more they realized there were things that didn't match up. What initially seemed like a tragic disappearance was now looking more like a carefully hidden truth, and detectives began focusing on John as a prime person of interest. As the investigation deepened, a significant break in the case occurred. Jonathan Palmerton, a close friend of John's, was arrested for perjury. It was revealed that Jonathan had lied during his testimony, trying to protect John and deflect attention away from him. Jonathan's false statements had clouded the investigation from the start, and his arrest raised even more questions. Detectives began to wonder whether there was more to the story than they had originally thought. Had Jonathan been involved in the cover-up, or was he merely trying to protect his friend? The arrest added another layer of complexity to the case and pointed to a possible conspiracy to conceal the truth about what happened to Katelyn.
I know that I would never hurt Katelyn, ever, in a million.
As the investigation continued, more evidence began to point directly at John. Deleted text messages, an inconsistent timeline, and even a failed polygraph test suggested that John had something to hide. His reluctance to cooperate fully with authorities raised serious doubts about his involvement. His behavior after Katelyn's disappearance had already seemed odd, and now it appeared even more suspicious. Investigators believed that John might have known more than he had let on. Eventually, the weight of the evidence led to John's arrest. He was charged with perjury after being caught in multiple falsehoods about Katelyn's disappearance. Although the investigation into Katelyn's murder was still ongoing, John was sentenced to 36 months in prison for his actions. The case remained far from closed, but this was a step toward finding justice for Katelyn. Even after Katelyn's remains were found and John was convicted of perjury, many questions remained unanswered. Who was truly responsible for Katelyn's death? Could there have been others involved, or was John acting alone? The circumstances surrounding Katelyn's death still left gaps in the investigation. Despite the developments, the case did not bring the closure her family desperately sought. There were pieces missing, and the truth was still beyond reach. The fact that her body was hidden for so long only deepened the mystery. The hope for clarity remained, but the search for answers was far from over. The questions continued to haunt those who loved her, and the journey to uncover the full truth pressed on. Katelyn's family remains in mourning, their lives forever altered by the loss of a beloved daughter and sister. Her younger sister, especially, has felt the impact of the tragedy deeply, struggling with the void left behind. The investigation is ongoing, with new evidence being reviewed and fresh leads being pursued. While the path forward remains uncertain, Katelyn's family continues to push for answers, advocating tirelessly for the truth to come out. Their commitment to seeking justice has only grown stronger, and they believe that one day the full truth will be revealed. For Katelyn, they will never stop fighting. They hold on to the hope that justice will prevail and that Katelyn's memory will live on through the ongoing search for the truth.